The garage door was open. That was the first thing that told me something was wrong. I stood at the kitchen sink with a mug of coffee cooling between my hands, staring through the small window above it. The door shouldn't have been open. In 43 years of marriage, Dennis never left it that way. Not once. Rain, snow, summer heat, it didn't matter. That door was always shut, always locked, always exactly how he left it. But Dennis had been gone for 8 months. I set the mug down slowly, like any sudden movement might make what I was seeing disappear. Didn't. The dark rectangle of the garage gaped back at me, empty and wrong. My chest tightened, the way it used to during long shifts in the ICU when I already knew the outcome but hadn't seen the chart yet. I walked to the back door and stepped outside. The air was warm for April, the kind of morning Dennis loved. He would have been out there already, sleeves rolled up, a rag tucked into his back pocket, humming along to that old radio he refused to replace. The grass was too long. I'd been meaning to call someone about that. Kept putting it off. I crossed the yard in my slippers. The concrete felt cold under my feet. As I reached the garage, the smell hit me first. Motor oil, old leather, that sharp citrus hand soap he always used. Everything smelled like him. Except the space in the middle. 20 years of the same car sitting in the same spot leaves a mark. A dark oil stain, perfectly shaped, like a shadow that refused to fade. But the car, the Shelby, was gone. I stood there staring at the empty space, my brain refusing to catch up with my eyes. The workbench along the back wall looked untouched. Tools hung neatly on the pegboard, each outlined in black marker the way Dennis liked it. The red toolbox sat closed. His work journal lay open beside it, exactly where he'd left it. The car was gone. My throat closed. I put a hand on the doorframe and forced myself to breathe. In through my nose, out through my mouth. Decades of nursing had drilled that into me. Panic helps no one. I walked to the bench and picked up the journal. The last entry was dated 3 weeks before Dennis died. His handwriting looked tired. Still careful but looser, like his hand didn't quite have the strength it used to. Almost finished. 20 years on this beauty. Can't wait to teach Carol to drive her the right way. Our retirement road trip starts next summer. I shut the journal and placed it back exactly where it had been. The garage felt too quiet without the car. Oh, hello. I could almost hear the radio anyway. Classic rock drifting through the air. Dennis singing off-key when he thought I wasn't listening. An engine sounded on Oakwood Drive. I turned just as a black BMW pulled into my driveway. Brian. My son stepped out, shoulders already hunched, hands shoved into his pockets. 38 years old and still wearing guilt like it was stitched into his jacket. Even from across the yard I could see it. The passenger door opened and Vanessa stepped out. Perfect as always. Smooth dark hair, oversized sunglasses, clothes that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill. She stood beside the car and looked at me, really looked at me, like she was assessing a piece of furniture. Brian walked toward me and stopped at the edge of the driveway. "Mom," he said. Waited. "I need to talk to you about something." I didn't blink. "Where's the car, Brian?" His jaw tightened. He glanced toward the garage, then down at the ground. That's what I need to talk to you about." "Where is it?" He swallowed. "I sold it." For a second the words didn't land. They just hovered there, meaningless sounds. "You what?" "I sold it yesterday." He finally looked up, eyes rimmed red. "I needed the money. That was your father's car. It was just sitting there." He shot back, defensiveness creeping into his voice. "Dad's gone. You don't even drive it." It was past tense. I crossed my arms to hide the shaking in my hands. "When did you take it?" "Yesterday afternoon." "You were at the store." "I still had my key." Of course he did. Dennis never made him give it back. Vanessa walked up then, slipping her arm through Brian's like she owned him, like she owned the driveway. Her nails were immaculate, painted a sharp red. "Carol," she said pleasantly, "we're not going to argue about this." "Done. We leave for Paris tomorrow." I looked at her. really looked. She'd been married to my son for 2 years, and I still didn't know anything real about her. She smiled a lot, but it never reached her eyes. "This is between me and my son," I said. "I'm his wife." Her tone was light, reasonable. "What affects him affects both of us." Brian stared at the ground. "How much?" I asked quietly. 15,000, he muttered. "That's fair for a car that old." The number felt like a slap. Vanessa smiled. "We'll send pictures from Paris. You'd love it there. Very romantic." They left a minute later. Brian glanced back once. Just once. Then the BMW disappeared down the street. I locked the garage and went back inside, the journal clutched to my chest. The empty space felt like a wound. I didn't sleep that night. At 7 the next morning the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Mrs. Bennett," a man said, voice rough. "My name is Tom Graves. I have your husband's car." I sat up straight. "There's something Dennis wanted you to know," he continued. "Something he hid before he died." The coffee on the table had gone cold again. And just like that, I knew my husband wasn't finished protecting us yet. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after the call ended. Didn't move. Didn't even reach for the coffee sitting inches from my hand. The house was quiet in that heavy way it gets when you're alone too long. The kind of silence that makes every little sound feel louder than it should. The refrigerator humming, the clock ticking, the wind brushing against the windows. "I have your husband's car." The words replayed over and over in my head, like my brain was stuck on a broken record. Dennis's car. A Shelby. I pressed my palms flat against the table and took a slow breath. In through my nose. Out through my mouth. Same way I'd taught patience for decades when panic threatened to take over. But this wasn't panic. This was something deeper. Something colder. Brian sold it. Not just sold it. He handed it to a stranger. A man I'd never met. For $15,000. For a vacation. I stood up and walked back to the garage. The door was still locked. The light still off. I flipped the switch and stepped inside. The empty space hit me all over again. The oil stain on the concrete looked darker now, like it was accusing me of something. I walked to the workbench and ran my fingers over the tools. Everything was in its place. Dennis had been meticulous about that. He used to say a man could tell a lot about himself by how he treated his tools. The journal was still there. I opened it again, not because I expected to find something new, but because I needed to feel close to him. The pages smelled faintly of oil and paper and time. I flipped back a few entries, then a few more. Dennis had documented everything. Every bolt replaced. Every setback. Every small victory. Then I noticed something. There were gaps. Not missing pages. Missing details. Weeks where the entries were shorter. Less about the car. More vague. Notes that didn't quite make sense unless you were looking for something else. My stomach tightened. Dennis didn't do vague. I closed the journal slowly. That's when the phone rang again. I jumped this time. "Mrs. Bennett," the same voice said. "It's Tom. I just wanted to make sure you were really coming. I didn't mean to overwhelm you." "I'm coming," I said. "Just tell me one thing first." "Of course. Why you?" "Yes. Why did my husband trust you with his car?" There was a pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end. "Because 25 years ago," he said quietly, "I was broke, desperate, and about to lose everything. And your husband put his name on a loan for me when no one else would. That made me sit down." "He didn't tell me that," I said. "He wouldn't have," Tom replied. "That was Dennis." The drive across town felt surreal. Traffic lights. Storefronts. People going about their day like nothing had changed. I passed the hospital again. Remembered Dennis bringing me lunch on night shifts. Sitting in the car for hours just to walk me out afterward. Graves' classic auto stood at the end of the road like a promise. Clean. Quiet. Respectful. Tom was waiting outside when I pulled in. He looked relieved when he saw me. "Thank you for coming," he said again like he wasn't sure I would. Inside, the place smelled different than my garage. Cleaner. Less personal. But when he led me toward the back, toward a covered car tucked slightly away from the others, my heart started pounding. "This is it," he said. He pulled the cover back slowly, like it mattered. The Shelby looked perfect. Better than perfect. Dennis had poured 20 years of his life into that car, and it showed. Every inch of it carried his patience, his stubbornness, his love for things done the right way. I reached out and touched the hood. My hand trembled. "He talked about this car constantly," Tom said. "Said it wasn't just metal. Said it was a promise." "A promise to who?" I asked. "To you." I looked at him. Tom swallowed. "He told me if anything ever happened to him, and if the car ever left your hands without your say-so, I was supposed to call you. No matter what." "Why?" I whispered. "Because," Tom said, "there's something inside that car you were never supposed to lose." My heart skipped. "What do you mean, inside?" Tom glanced toward the door, then back at me. "Dennis asked me to help him install something. A hidden compartment. 2 years ago." The air felt suddenly too thin. "He said if he told you, it would put you in danger sooner than necessary," Tom continued. "He said you'd understand once you saw it." "Danger from who?" I asked. Tom didn't answer right away. "From someone very close to you," he finally said. My mind went straight to Brian. Then, without warning, to Vanessa. I shook my head. "That doesn't make sense." "It will," Tom said gently. Dennis didn't jump to conclusions. He was careful. Methodical. He spent a long time making sure. Making sure of what? Tom stepped back from the car and gestured toward the driver's side. "I think," he said, "it's time you saw what your husband was really working on during those last months." I stood there, staring at the Shelby, my reflection warped slightly in the paint. Dennis hadn't just been restoring a car. He'd been preparing for something. And whatever it was, it had already started. I didn't move right away. I just stood there, staring at the car like it might suddenly explain itself. The Shelby sat under the bright shop lights, calm and silent, like it didn't know it had just become the center of my world all over again. "A hidden compartment," I said slowly. Tom nodded. "Dennis didn't want anyone finding it by accident. Not your son. Not his wife. Not even me once it was finished." My stomach tightened at the way he said his wife. "Show me," I said. Tom hesitated. "Before I do, there's something you need to understand." Dennis was scared. Not the panicked kind of scared. Quiet kind. The kind that makes a man plan instead of react. Dennis had always been like that. When something was wrong, he didn't raise his voice. He paid attention. Took notes. Waited. Tom opened the driver's door and gestured for me to sit. The leather seat creaked softly under my weight, familiar in a way that made my throat ache. The steering wheel was worn exactly where Dennis's hands had rested for years. I ran my fingers over it without thinking. "He sat right there," Tom said, like he was reading my mind. "The night we installed it. Stayed quiet the whole time." "What was he afraid of?" I asked. Tom reached toward the dashboard. "Not afraid. Certain." He pressed a small spot beneath the radio panel. Nothing obvious, nothing you'd notice unless you were looking for it. There was a faint click. The faceplate shifted. My heart started pounding. Tom stepped back. "He wanted you to open it." "Not me." My hands felt clumsy as I reached forward and pulled gently. The panel slid away, revealing a dark space behind it. Smaller than I expected. Tighter. Intentional. Inside was a thick manila folder. And an envelope. The envelope had my name on it. Written in Dennis's handwriting. Froze. Tom didn't say a word. He turned and walked away, giving me privacy without being asked. I pulled the envelope out first. For a moment I just held it. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Like it knew what it contained. Then I opened it. "Curl, if you're reading this, then I didn't get the chance to finish what I started. I'm sorry for that." My vision blurred instantly. "I wanted to tell you everything. God knows I did. But the timing was never right, and once I realized what was happening, I couldn't risk putting you in the middle before I had proof. Proof. The word jumped off the page. I've been watching Vanessa for a long time now. Longer than I let on. 10 months, give or take. My breath caught. She isn't who she says she is. I had to stop reading. The shop felt too quiet. Too far away. I pressed my hand to my chest and forced myself to breathe again. 10 months. Dennis had been dying for part of that time. And he'd still been protecting us. Continued. I didn't want to believe it at first. I hoped I was wrong. But patterns don't lie, Carol. People repeat themselves. Especially when they think no one's paying attention. She asks the right questions. About the house. About your health. About our finances. Always framed as concern. That's how she works. My hands were shaking now. I confronted her once. Carefully. Just enough to watch her reaction. She didn't deny anything. She deflected. Changed the subject. Turned it back on me. That sounded like Vanessa. Brian won't see it yet. He's too close. If I tell him now, he'll think I'm trying to control him. He'll choose her. And once that happens, she'll move faster. Tears slid down my face, landing on the paper. In the folder are documents, photos, names. I followed the trail as far as I could. 2 men before Brian. Same pattern. Same ending. 2 men. My stomach dropped. I didn't finish. I ran out of time. That line broke me. The key you'll find with this letter opens our safe deposit box. Box 447 at First National. Inside are things I kept separate on purpose. Money you didn't know about. Insurance I hope you'll never need. I wiped my face with my sleeve and kept reading. Tom knows everything. He's good people. Trust him. He owes me his life, and he's never forgotten it. Protect yourself. Protect Brian. He's a victim in this too, whether he knows it or not. Love you. I always will. Dennis. I folded the letter carefully and held it against my chest. For 8 months, I'd thought I was grieving a man who had simply gotten sick and died. I was wrong. Dennis had been fighting right up until the end. I reached back into the compartment and pulled out the folder. It was thick, heavy with paper. Inside were photos. Vanessa standing beside another man. Older. Gray hair. His arm around her waist. Another photo. Another man. Different state. Different date. Marriage certificates. My hands went cold. Vanessa Cortland. Married. Before Brian. My knees went weak. I slid out of the car and sat on the concrete floor, the folder spilling open in my lap. There were notes in Dennis's handwriting. Observations. Asked about Carol's memory again. Brought up assisted living casually. Watching for reaction. Photos of house taken during visit. Claimed it was for decorating ideas. I remembered all of it. Comments. The looks. The way she always spoke like she was helping. I hadn't imagined it. At the back of the folder were phone numbers. Stanley Wright. George Murphy. I stared at them for a long time. Tom came back and crouched a few feet away from me. He was right, wasn't he? He said quietly. Yes, I whispered. And now she's married to my son. Tom exhaled slowly. Then we don't have much time. I looked up at him. Why? Because if she's already convinced Brian to sell the car, he said, she's already moved to the next phase. What phase? Tom met my eyes. Taking everything else. I closed the folder and stood. For the first time since Dennis died, I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was ready to finish what he started. I didn't go home right away. Tom offered me coffee, water, anything, but I shook my head. I needed movement. Needed distance between myself and the weight of what I'd just learned. Sitting still felt dangerous, like if I stopped for too long I'd fall apart. I slid the folder into my bag, careful, deliberate. Felt wrong to leave it behind. Dennis hadn't built all this just for me to set it down somewhere and forget about it. Where are you going? Mask. To the bank, I said. Then I'm making some phone calls. He nodded like he'd expected that answer. Call me if you need anything, he said. And Carol, don't confront her. Not yet. I won't, I said. Dennis didn't. First National Bank was busy for a weekday afternoon. People stood in line, chatting about deposits and loans, the kind of ordinary concerns that felt almost insulting right now. I gave the clerk my name and asked for the safe deposit box. Box 447. The manager led me to the vault, the door thick and heavy. The key fit smoothly like it had been waiting for me. Inside was a single envelope. I opened it at the small metal table provided. Stock certificates. Blinked. There was a letter attached, folded once. Carol. I bought these in 1994 as a favor to a patient. $5,000. I didn't expect anything to come of it. My hands started to shake again. I found them recently and finally looked up the company. You should too. I took the certificates back to the manager, who disappeared into her office and returned 10 minutes later with an expression that told me everything. Mrs. Bennett, she said carefully, these are currently valued at approximately $340,000. The room tilted. Dennis had been planning for a future I never knew existed. I sat in my car afterward, hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Vanessa didn't know about the money. She didn't know about the folder. She didn't know Dennis had seen her coming. Not yet. I pulled out my phone and stared at the first name in the folder. Stanley Wright. Phoenix, Arizona. My thumb hovered over the call button for a full minute before I pressed it. The phone rang 3 times. Hello. His voice sounded tired. Worn. My name is Carol Bennett, I said. I'm calling because my son is married to a woman named Vanessa Cortland. There was a long silence. Then a sigh. I was wondering when someone would call, he said. Stanley talked slowly like every word cost him something. He told me about meeting Vanessa at a community center. About how kind she'd seemed. How patient. How she'd made him feel seen again after his wife died. She was perfect, he said. That's what should have tipped me off. His mother had raised concerns. Small ones at first. Stanley brushed them off. Then Vanessa started planting doubts. Your mom seems confused lately. She forgot my name again. What if something happens and you're not there? Within months, Stanley was convinced his mother wasn't safe. Vanessa found a memory care facility. Top of the line. $20,000 a month. The only way to afford it was to sell his mother's house. She cried when I told her, Stanley said quietly. I told myself it was for her own good. The house sold. The money went into a joint account. 2 weeks later, Vanessa was gone. So was every dollar. Stanley's mother died 6 months after that. I tell you this because I don't want another family destroyed, he said. She'll convince your son you're declining. That you need help. That selling the house is the responsible thing to do. My grip tightened on the phone. Thank you, I said. I believe you. When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Then I dialed the second number. George Murphy answered on the first ring. When I said Vanessa's name, he didn't even pretend to be surprised. Same story, he said. Different state. George met Vanessa after his father's funeral. She understood grief. She said all the right things. They married 8 months later. She told me selling the shop would help me heal, he said. That we'd travel. Start over. 3 days after the money cleared, she vanished. She's very good at this, George said. She studies people. Learns their weaknesses. When the call ended, my hands were numb. Dennis hadn't been paranoid. He'd been late. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote everything down. Every comment. Every question Vanessa had ever asked. Every moment that had felt off. It formed a pattern so clear it made my stomach turn. She wasn't reacting to circumstances. She was creating them. When I finished, I closed the notebook and looked around the house. My house. The one she wanted. And for the first time since Dennis died, I felt something other than grief or anger. Felt ready. They came back from Paris on a Tuesday. I knew because Brian texted me a photo before they even landed. The Eiffel Tower framed just right, Vanessa leaning into him, smiling like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. Soon. We should get together, the message read. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. Dinner tomorrow, I typed. If you're not too tired. Vanessa responded almost immediately. Would love that red heart. The heart made my jaw tighten. I spent Wednesday afternoon cooking. Not because I needed to impress them but because routine steadied me. Pot roast in the oven. Mashed potatoes. Apple pie cooling on the counter. Dennis's favorites. Brian's too, when he was still a boy who came home hungry and loud and uncomplicated. They arrived right on time. Brian looked thinner. Tired in a way vacation shouldn't cause. Vanessa, on the other hand, looked energized. New clothes, new bag, a glow that came from spending money that wasn't hers. She hugged me lightly at the door. Carol, you look good, she said. Rested. It wasn't a compliment. It was an assessment. Dinner started easy enough. Paris this, Paris that. The food. The hotel. The people they'd met. Vanessa told the stories. Brian nodded along, filling in details when prompted. Then she shifted. It was amazing, she said, setting her fork down. But it also made us realize how short life is. How important it is to make smart choices while we can. Brian glanced at her, then at me. Mom, he said, have you ever thought about traveling more? Or maybe simplifying things a bit? There it was. I'm happy here, I said calmly. Vanessa smiled. Of course. But this house. It's a lot for one person. The stairs. The yard. We just worry. I made a mental note. I manage, I said. Vanessa let it go for now. After dinner, she excused herself to use the bathroom. She was gone longer than necessary. I waited 5 minutes, then stood and walked down the hall. The bathroom door was open and empty. I heard movement upstairs. Vanessa was standing near Dennis's old office when she noticed me. Oh, she laughed lightly. I got turned around. This house is like a maze. The bathroom had been in the same place for 40 years. Smiled. It's downstairs. She followed me back without another word. They left an hour later. Brian hugged me longer than usual. Love you, Mom, he said quietly. I watched their car disappear, then went straight to my notebook and wrote everything down. The next morning I called Brian. I found something of your father's, I said. I think you should see it. Silence. Is Vanessa coming? He asked. No. Another pause. Okay. This afternoon. He arrived alone but tense. I laid the folder on the table between us. Before you say anything, I said, read this. He didn't want to. Could see it. But he did. His face changed as he read Dennis's letter. Confusion, anger, disbelief. This is insane, he said finally. Dad never liked Vanessa. He liked evidence, I replied. I slid the photos across the table. Brian stood up abruptly. You're trying to sabotage my marriage. Call them, I said, pushing the phone numbers toward him. Ask them yourself. He stared at the paper like it might bite him. I'm leaving, he said. He didn't look back. That night felt endless. I didn't sleep. Didn't eat. Just waited. Midnight my phone rang. Brian's name lit up the screen. His voice was broken. I called them. My eyes closed. They said everything, he whispered. It's all true. There was a long silence between us. I don't know who she is, he said finally. Or who I married. You're safe now, I said. That's what matters. But even as I said it, I knew the truth. Vanessa wasn't finished. And now that Brian knew, she wouldn't go quietly. Brian didn't come home that night. He said he was staying with a friend. Said he needed time to think. I understood what that really meant. He was afraid of what would happen if he went back to her. Vanessa noticed immediately. She called me the next morning. Carol, she said, voice soft, concerned. Brian didn't come home. I'm worried. I'm sure he's fine, I said. He's a grown man. Was. Then a careful laugh. Of course. I just thought, well, after everything he's been through, grief can do strange things to people. Grief. She was laying the groundwork already. Brian's strong, I said. He gets that from his father. Another pause. This one sharper. If you hear from him, she said, let me know. I will, I replied. I hung up and sat there for a moment, phone still in my hand. Dennis had been right. She always framed her control as concern. Brian came by later that afternoon. He looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept and didn't plan to. She's acting like nothing happened, he said, sitting at the kitchen table. Making breakfast, asking about my day, talking about therapy, about how you might need support after everything you've been through. I set a cup of tea in front of him. That's not an accident, I said. She's testing you. She went through my phone, he added quietly. Asked why I'd called Arizona. My jaw tightened. What did you say? I lied, he said. For the first time in my life, I lied to my wife. And how did that feel? He let out a humorless laugh. Terrible. Necessary. He nodded. That means you're waking up. He looked at me. Really looked. Dad knew, he said. All this time he knew. Yes, I said. And he didn't want you hurt. Brian swallowed hard. She asked about the house again this morning, he said. Said maybe selling it would take stress off you. Suggested a condo. Somewhere safer. There it was. She's moving faster now, I said. Because she knows something's changed. What do we do? He asked. I reached for Dennis's journal and slid it toward him. We do what your father did, I said. We document everything. 3 days later, Vanessa showed up unannounced. I saw her car pull into the driveway and felt my shoulders tense. She stepped out holding a small gift bag, smile perfectly in place. I thought I'd check on you, she said brightly. Brian's been distant, and I hate thinking you might feel lonely. I stepped aside and let her in. She looked around the house like she always did, eyes flicking from room to room, cataloging. I brought you a candle, she said. Lavender. It's calming. I set it on the counter unopened. We sat in the living room. She crossed her legs, posture relaxed. Carol, she said gently, have you noticed any changes lately? Memory lapses. Confusion. I met her gaze. No. She nodded slowly. Because Brian's been worried. He mentioned you misplaced some things recently. That was new. I'm fine, I said. Of course you are, she replied quickly. But sometimes people don't notice their own decline. It might be smart to get evaluated. Just to be safe. She leaned forward slightly. For your own good. Smiled. I've worked in medicine for 35 years, I said. If anyone needs evaluation, I'll know. Her smile faltered just for a second. I only mean. I know what you mean, I said. And I don't appreciate it. The room went quiet. Vanessa stood. I didn't mean to upset you. I'm not upset, I said. I'm aware. She studied me for a long moment, then picked up her purse. I'll tell Brian you're doing well, she said. Please do. After she left, my hands were shaking. That night Brian called. She's furious, he said. But she's pretending she's not. Good, I said. That means she's losing control. There was a pause. She threatened to leave, he added. Said she couldn't stay married to someone who didn't trust her. And I told her I needed time. Another pause. She asked about Dad's things, he said quietly. Specifically the car. Closed my eyes. She doesn't know where it is, I said. And she's not going to. What if she goes to the police, he asked. For what? Said. Being exposed. He let out a shaky breath. I'm scared, he admitted. So am I said. But your father planned for this. We just have to follow through. Outside, the house creaked softly as the wind picked up. Somewhere down the street, a car door slammed. And for the first time, I wondered how far Vanessa was willing to go once she realized she'd been outplayed. The first thing Vanessa did when she realized she was losing Brian was change tactics. She stopped pushing. No more questions about my health. No more casual comments about selling the house. No more concern wrapped in sweetness. Instead, she went quiet. Too quiet. Brian noticed it before I did. "She's being nice," he said over the phone one evening. "Cooking. Leaving notes. Talking about starting fresh." "That's not peace," I told him. "That's regrouping." Dennis used to say people showed you who they really were when their plan failed. I'd never fully understood what he meant until now. 2 days later, I got a call from my doctor's office. "Mrs. Bennett," the receptionist said politely, "we have you scheduled for a cognitive assessment this Friday." My grip tightened on the phone. "I didn't schedule anything," I said. "Oh," she replied, confused. "Your daughter-in-law called. Said you asked her to arrange it." "Course she did." "I'm canceling," I said. Immediately. When I hung up, my hands were ice cold. She wasn't just testing boundaries anymore. She was creating records. Brian came over that night, furious in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. "She had no right," he said. "That's fraud." "No," I said quietly. "That's strategy." I pulled out the notebook. "Every move she makes now," I continued, "is about establishing a story. That you're unstable. That I'm declining. That she's the reasonable one trying to help." Brian ran a hand through his hair. "What if it works?" "It won't," I said. "Because we're documenting everything." He looked at me. "Dad really thought of everything, didn't he?" "Yes," I said. "He just didn't get time to finish." The next escalation came faster than I expected. I returned home from the grocery store one afternoon to find my front door unlocked. Nothing looked disturbed at first glance. No broken locks, no mess, but my instinct screamed. I walked through each room slowly. The filing cabinet in Dennis's office was closed, but not locked. Opened it. Several folders were out of order. She'd been searching. I checked the safe hidden behind the false panel in the closet. She hadn't found it. That night I called Tom. "She's escalating," I said. "I figured she would," he replied. "I've been meaning to tell you something." I straightened. "What?" "I had a buyer come by today asking very specific questions about the Shelby," he said. "Didn't want to see it. Just wanted to confirm ownership history. Wanted names." My stomach dropped. "Did you tell him anything?" "Nothing he didn't already know," Tom said. "But Carol, he wasn't there for the car." "He was there for me," I said. "Yes." The next morning, a police cruiser pulled into my driveway. My heart pounded as I opened the door. The officer was polite. Young. Apologetic. "We received a welfare check request," he said. "From a concerned family member. Vanessa." "I'm fine," I said calmly. "Would you like to come in?" He did. Looked around. Asked a few questions. Made notes. "I was a nurse for 35 years, I said. "Here are my medical records if you need them." He smiled awkwardly. "That won't be necessary, ma'am." Before he left, he glanced back at me. "You might want to consider installing cameras," he said quietly. "Just in case." I closed the door and leaned against it. She was done pretending. Brian showed up an hour later, pale. "She filed for separation," he said. "Cited emotional abuse. Said you were manipulating me." I let out a slow breath. "Good," I said. He stared at me. "Good." "Yes," I replied. "Because now she's on record. And people like Vanessa hate being on record." I pulled out Dennis's letter and handed it to him again. "She's rushing," I said. "And when people rush, they make mistakes." Brian nodded slowly. "She doesn't know about the money," he said. "Or the safe deposit box." "No," I said. "And she won't." He hesitated. "What if she tries something worse?" I met his eyes. "Then," I said, "we stop playing defense." Outside, a car passed slowly, almost too slowly. And for the first time I felt certain of one thing. Vanessa wasn't leaving with our lives in pieces. Not this time. The cameras went up 2 days later. Brian insisted on paying for them himself. Front door. Back door. Garage. Hallway leading to Dennis's old office. Nothing obvious, nothing flashy. Just quiet eyes watching. Dad would have liked this, Brian said as he adjusted one near the porch light. He would have said it was overdue, I replied. That night was the first time the house didn't feel completely vulnerable. Vanessa didn't call. She didn't text. That alone told me she was planning something. On the third day of silence, Brian forwarded me an email she'd sent him. I'm worried about your mother. She's isolating you from me. This isn't healthy. I've spoken to a lawyer about options if she continues interfering. I read it twice. She's trying to make me the villain, I said. She already has, Brian replied. To anyone who'll listen. That was fine. Villains don't have to be honest. They just have to be prepared. The break came sooner than expected. At 2:14 a.m. my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Garage. I sat straight up in bed. Another alert. Back door. My heart pounded but my mind was clear. Dennis used to say fear only worked if you let it rush you. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera feed. The back door was ajar. A shadow moved inside the garage. I didn't scream. I didn't call Brian. Called the police. Someone is inside my home, I said calmly. I'm alone. Then I locked myself in the bedroom and watched. The garage camera showed her clearly. Vanessa. Dressed in dark clothes. Gloves on her hands. She moved fast straight to the workbench. Opened drawers. Checked walls. Then the filing cabinet. She knew exactly what she was looking for. When the sirens came, she froze. Then she ran. The police caught her 2 blocks away. By morning everything was different. Breaking and entering. False welfare reports. Fraudulent medical scheduling. Trespassing. Harassment. It added up fast. Brian arrived just as the sun came up. She tried to say you invited her, he said. That she was worried about you. I handed him my phone. The video was clear. Time-stamped. Unforgiving. She's done, he said quietly. Almost, I replied. Vanessa was released by afternoon. No charges yet. Just a warning. Paperwork. But her mask was gone. She called me that evening. You think you've won, she said, voice tight. You've turned my husband against me. I didn't do anything, I said. You did. You don't know who you're dealing with, she snapped. Smiled. My husband did, I said. That was enough. She hung up. 2 days later, her lawyer contacted Brian. They wanted a settlement. Quick divorce. No alimony. Clean break. Brian agreed immediately. I don't want anything from her, he said. I just want out. The papers were filed within the week. Vanessa left town the same day. No goodbye. No apology. Just gone. I sat alone in the garage that evening. The Shelby sat where it belonged now, back home, the way Dennis would have wanted. I ran my hand over the hood and felt the familiar calm settle in. You did good, I whispered. The house was quiet again. But this time it didn't feel empty. Felt safe. Vanessa disappeared the way she'd entered our lives. Quietly, leaving just enough damage behind to make you question what was real. The divorce moved fast after that. Too fast for someone who once claimed she loved Brian. She signed everything without a fight. No request. No arguments. Like a person cutting loose dead weight before it could drag them under. Brian moved back in with me temporarily. I just need somewhere that feels real, he said, setting his bags down in his old room. Understood. The first few weeks were strange. We relearned each other in silence. Morning coffee at opposite ends of the table. Small conversations about nothing. Shared glances when memories surfaced without warning. One night Brian finally spoke. She was already gone before she left, he said quietly. I just didn't see it. That's how people like her work, I replied. They leave before you realize you're alone. He nodded. I keep thinking about Dad, he said. How much he saw. How much he didn't say. He said it in his own way, I said. He left you alive and free. That was his message. Brian swallowed hard. Tom came by one afternoon with coffee and a folded newspaper. She's been spotted in Nevada, he said casually. Different last name already. I wasn't surprised. She won't stop, Brian said. No, Tom replied. But she won't come back here either. Not now. Dennis's planning had done more than protect us. It had marked her. I finally went through everything Dennis left behind. Every note, every document, every thought he never spoke aloud. In one envelope I found something unexpected. A handwritten will. Different from the official one. Curl, if you're reading this, then I was right. And I'm sorry you had to find out this way. The money is yours. All of it. Not to spend but to live without fear. Brian will need time. Give it to him. And when you're ready, take the car on the road. Let it remind you that not everything we build is meant to stay parked. I folded the letter and held it close. Spring turned into summer. The house felt lighter. Not because the memories were gone, but because they weren't being twisted anymore. Brian started therapy. I don't want to repeat this, he said one evening. I don't want to be blind again. That's how you honor your father, I told him. One morning I pulled the Shelby out of the garage. The engine purred like it had been waiting. I drove with the windows down, the radio on low. Dennis's favorite song playing like he was sitting beside me. At a red light, I smiled for the first time in months without forcing it. Vanessa faded into the background. A warning story. Lesson. Nothing more. And in the quiet that followed, I realized something important. Dennis hadn't just protected us from her. He'd given us back our future. Life didn't snap back to normal. It settled. Slowly. Carefully. Like a bone healing the right way instead of being forced into place. Brian found an apartment across town. Small, clean, nothing fancy. He invited me over the first night he spent there, like he needed a witness to prove he was really starting over. I kept it simple on purpose, he said, opening the door. No clutter. No history. Smiled. History has a way of following you anyway. Yeah, he said. But this time I'm choosing what stays. I went back to volunteering at the hospital. Not full shifts, just a few hours a week. Enough to feel useful again. Familiar faces welcomed me like I'd never left. And for the first time since Dennis died, I wasn't just surviving the days. One afternoon, a young nurse sat beside me in the break room. How do you know when to trust someone? She asked suddenly. I thought about Vanessa. About Dennis. You don't look for perfection, I said. You look for consistency. She nodded like that was something she'd needed to hear. The money stayed where it was. I didn't touch it. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need to. Dennis had been right. Knowing it existed was enough. It was security, not temptation. Tom called every now and then. Cars running smooth, he'd ask. Like it never left, I'd reply. One evening, Brian showed up unexpectedly. He looked lighter, clearer. I met someone, he said. I didn't react. Not like before, he added quickly. Just coffee. Conversation. That's how it's supposed to start, I said. He smiled. Real one. I found myself talking to Dennis more. Not out loud. Not like he was still here. Just small moments, when the house creaked at night, when the engine started clean on the first turn, when Brian laughed the way he used to as a boy. You don't stop missing people. You stop bleeding from it. One afternoon I opened the garage and just stood there. The Shelby sat in its place. The tools hung neatly. The oil stain still marked the floor. Some things don't need to be erased. They just need to be understood. I locked the garage and went back inside. The sun slanted through the windows, warm and soft. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something I had to brace for. Felt like something I could walk into. Autumn arrived quietly. One morning the air felt different, cooler, sharper, like the world had taken a deep breath. I noticed it while sweeping the porch, leaves skittering across the steps, refusing to stay in one place. Dennis used to love this season. Everything finally slows down, he'd say. You can see what actually matters. I understood now what he meant. Brian came by on Sundays. Not out of obligation, not because he felt guilty, just because he wanted to. We cooked together sometimes. Other times we sat on the porch with coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. She didn't just lie to me, he said once. She taught me how easy it is to ignore your instincts when you're afraid of being alone. That lesson will save you, I told him. He nodded. I think Dad knew that too. I took the Shelby on longer drives. Nothing dramatic. Just empty roads, quiet towns, gas stations where no one knew my name. I kept the radio low and my thoughts even lower. One afternoon, I stopped near a lake Dennis and I had visited years ago. I sat on the hood and watched the water ripple in the wind. For the first time, the memory didn't hurt. Just existed. The lawyer called in October. Vanessa had officially changed her name again. Moved again. No forwarding address. She's gone, he said. I thanked him and hung up without feeling anything in particular. Some chapters don't need closure. They just need distance. I started sorting through old photographs. Boxes I'd avoided for years. Trip, birthdays. Small moments that once felt ordinary. I laughed more than I cried. Dennis looked happy in most of them. So did I. One evening, Brian asked a question I hadn't expected. Do you regret not telling me sooner? About her. Thought about it. No, I said honestly. You weren't ready to hear it then. Truth needs timing. He smiled softly. You sound like Dad. I learned from the best. Winter crept closer. The house stayed warm. The lights felt softer. The silence less heavy. I realized something one night while locking up. I wasn't waiting for the past to stop hurting anymore. I was living alongside it. And that was enough. The first snow fell overnight. Not the kind that shuts a city down. Just a thin, quiet layer that softened everything it touched. I noticed it when I opened the curtains that morning. The world outside muted and calm, like it was holding its breath. Dennis would have liked that. I made coffee and stood by the window, watching my breath fog the glass. For a long time after he died, mornings were the hardest. Waking up meant remembering all over again. Now waking up felt neutral. And that felt like progress. Brian came by later that day. Boots dusted with snow, cheeks red from the cold. I got the job, he said, barely inside the door. Smiled. Congratulations. New department. New people. No history, he added. That seems to be a theme lately. He laughed. Guess I learned something. We sat together at the table, hands wrapped around warm mugs. No rush to fill the silence. That afternoon I went into the garage. I didn't turn the light on right away. I just stood there, letting the familiar shapes settle around me. The workbench. The pegboard. The faint smell of oil and metal. I opened Dennis's journal one last time. Not to look for clues. Just to read. The final entry wasn't about the car. It was about me. Carol laughed today. Really laughed. I hope she keeps doing that when I'm gone. Closed the book gently. I will, I said out loud. The Shelby started on the first try. I drove slowly through the neighborhood. Tires crunching softly over snow. No destination. No plan. Just motion. At a stoplight, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked older. I also looked steady. That evening, I lit the lavender candle Vanessa had given me months ago. Not because of her. 'Cause I liked the way it smelled. I placed it on the mantel and watched the flame flicker. Power, I realized, wasn't about control. It was about knowing who you are when someone tries to take it from you. I locked the doors, turned off the lights, and went upstairs. The house settled around me, familiar and safe. In the quiet, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just real.